The sun was barely rising over Washington, D.C. when J.D. Vance sat in his office, still wearing yesterday's suit. The room was dim, lit only by the glow of his phone. He hadn't slept. The Senate confirmation vote was hours away. 3 Trump-aligned nominees, men Vance believed in with his whole heart, were about to be decided on. He'd spent months building trust, negotiating, pleading behind closed doors. Mitch McConnell had promised his support, but that morning, something felt off. Vance's calls went unanswered. His texts sat on read. In politics, silence doesn't mean peace. It means betrayal is on its way. A junior staffer knocked on his door, visibly shaken. "Sir, there's been a change." Vance's heart sank. The news hit him like a punch to the chest. McConnell wasn't just voting against the nominees. He was lobbying others to do the same. J.D. stared at the window, his voice barely above a whisper. "He lied to me." Later that day, J.D. Vance's staff uncovered something that made his blood run cold. A leaked Senate recording. It was Mitch McConnell. Calm. Calculating. Telling colleagues that J.D. wasn't ready to lead, and that Trump's influence needs to be contained. "I gave that boy a shot," McConnell said with a dry chuckle. "Now he thinks he can run the party?" J.D. listened to it twice, then 3 times. He couldn't believe it. This wasn't just political maneuvering, this was personal. He had looked up to Mitch once, defended him in interviews, shared meals with him. McConnell was the man who welcomed him to Washington. Now he was the knife in his back. J.D. sat in silence, not angry yet, just hurt. He picked up the framed photo on his desk, a picture of him and his wife, Usha, at the inauguration. He had made a promise that day. Always fight for what's right, even when it costs everything. The question now wasn't if he'd respond, it was how far he'd go. Hours later, a private call came in. It was Senator Josh Hawley. His voice was low. "J.D., it's spreading fast. Everyone's heard the tape. Half the caucus is scared. The other half is asking if you're going to fight back." J.D. closed his eyes. "I didn't come here to play games, Josh. I came here to fix this place." There was silence. Then J.D. added, "But I won't be silent anymore." He stood up and walked into the hallway, his team scrambling behind him. The Capitol felt different now, colder, heavier, like something had broken loose. Outside the Senate chamber, reporters swarmed. J.D. didn't flinch. He looked straight into the cameras and said 5 words that would shake Washington to its core. "You just made it personal." Somewhere, watching from his office, Mitch McConnell turned the screen off and whispered to himself, "I warned him." But what Mitch didn't realize was, J.D. Vance wasn't just fighting back. He was going to reshape the party from the inside out. And the battle had just begun. That night, J.D. Vance found himself alone on the balcony of the Naval Observatory, the cold wind cutting through his shirt. Inside, his team was scrambling, making calls, crunching numbers, planning responses. But J.D. wasn't thinking about politics. He was thinking about his mom. She'd left him a voicemail hours earlier. "J.D., baby, I saw the news. I know this world is full of snakes, but you've always had your heart. Don't lose it now, okay? Don't let them change you." Her voice cracked at the end, trying not to cry. J.D.'s throat tightened. He remembered everything. The pain of growing up poor, watching addiction destroy families, and promising himself, if he ever had a voice, he'd use it for the forgotten. Now the man he once called a mentor was trying to silence him. But J.D. didn't feel anger, not yet. He felt purpose. He took a deep breath, dialed his chief of staff, and said just 5 words. "Schedule a press conference tomorrow." This wasn't going to be handled behind closed doors anymore. The next morning, reporters packed into the White House press briefing room. Cameras flickered. Everyone sensed something big was coming. Vice President J.D. Vance stepped up to the podium. He wasn't reading from a script. No teleprompter, no staff notes, just raw truth. "I came to Washington to help restore honor and hope," he began. "But this week, I learned that betrayal doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from those you once trusted." The room went still. He paused, his voice heavy with emotion. "Senator McConnell didn't just vote against my nominees. He made calls to ensure they would never get a chance to serve. These were men who fought for this country, who bled for it, men who love America." JD's eyes glistened. "I don't care if it costs me politically. I won't stand by while power games crush good people." One reporter shouted, "Mr. Vice President, are you declaring war on Mitch McConnell?" JD didn't blink. "I'm declaring war on everything he represents." The room exploded. Twitter lit up. Millions watched live. And far away in a quiet Senate office, Mitch McConnell sat frozen, because he knew JD wasn't bluffing. That night, JD Vance called two senators he'd once considered close friends, men who campaigned with him, shared rides, prayed before debates. Neither answered. He tried again. Voicemail. He sat in his car in the Capitol garage, engine off, rain thudding softly against the windshield. He scrolled through his contacts, dozens of names, but all of them suddenly felt distant. The swamp had tightened around him. He was being iced out, not officially, no press releases, no public attacks, but his name was disappearing from joint legislation. His calls weren't returned. Invitations stopped coming. They weren't attacking him. They were isolating him. And that, he realized, was more dangerous. He whispered to himself, "They think if I stand alone, I'll fall quietly." But JD had learned to survive alone. From Middletown to the Marines, to Yale, to Washington, he never needed approval. What he needed was a reason. And now, thanks to Mitch, he had one. He looked at his reflection in the windshield and whispered, "They want war? Let's give them a fight they'll never forget." At exactly 2:42 p.m., a plain white envelope was slid under J.D. Vance's office door. No name, no return address. Inside was a USB drive. J.D. plugged it in, and what played was worse than anything he'd imagined. It was a private meeting, a video recording, taken in a dark, wood-paneled Senate room. Mitch McConnell sat at the head of the table, flanked by two senior GOP strategists. He was speaking coldly. "If we don't shut JD down now, the populist wing will take over completely. He's smart, dangerous, and emotional. That's the worst kind." Someone asked, "What about the base?" McConnell replied, "We don't need the base to like us. We just need them to show up." JD's hand shook. He felt sick. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a war against the people he'd sworn to fight for. He didn't know who had leaked it. But someone wanted him to see this. Someone in the shadows was watching and helping. JD stood up slowly, gripping the USB like it was a match. He was about to light the whole thing on fire. JD Vance returned to the Senate floor the next morning, but this time, he didn't just speak. He broke silence. C-SPAN was live. Phones buzzed as staffers realized something historic was unfolding. "Mr. President, I rise today not just to speak on nominees," JD began, "but to speak on the rot eating away at the Republican Party's soul." The chamber froze. JD pulled out the USB. "I received this from an anonymous source, a recording of leadership planning to destroy not just me, but you, the voters, the everyday Americans who believed in us." Gasps filled the room. "Some people think politics is about deals. I think it's about trust. I made a promise to the working class, to stand up when no one else would, and I still intend to." He played 15 seconds of the recording aloud. McConnell's voice filled the air. "We don't need the base to like us." Some senators stood in shock. Others looked away in shame. JD ended the speech in a whisper. "Let history remember this moment as the line in the sand. And then, without a word, he walked out. The internet exploded. 3 days later, J.D. Vance received a handwritten letter. It was from an Ohio widow. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Brian Keller, had died in Afghanistan. One of the blocked nominees, Colonel Thomas Wright, was her late husband's best friend. She had watched J.D.'s Senate speech with tears streaming down her face. "My husband used to say, J.D.'s the real deal. If anything ever happens to me, make sure someone like him is still fighting." Her letter ended with this: "You're not alone, J.D. You have us. Keep going." J.D. folded the letter slowly, then quietly excused himself from the meeting he was in. He walked to the Lincoln Memorial. It was quiet there, cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your chest. He sat on the steps for nearly an hour, staring at the marble, remembering every person he'd met in towns with no factories, homes with no hope, parents with empty arms. Then he made a decision. Not just political, personal. He would no longer play defense. He would launch a new movement inside the party, one that couldn't be silenced, no matter how many knives were thrown. The rebellion had officially begun. The phone vibrated on J.D.'s desk. The name flashed: Donald J. Trump. J.D. hesitated. Since becoming vice president, they had drifted apart. But now, after the leaked video, the Senate speech, and the widow's letter, Trump was reaching out. J.D. answered quietly, "Mr. President." Trump didn't waste time. "I saw the tape and the speech. I don't say this often, J.D., but that was damn brave." There was a pause. "McConnell just declared war on us," Trump continued. "You have one shot to unify the real Republicans, the ones outside the cocktail parties." J.D.'s voice cracked, just slightly. "They blocked Colonel Wright and 6 others. It wasn't politics, sir. It was personal." "I know," Trump replied. "That's why we're going to take the party back. But we need a plan. A real one." J.D. glanced at the photo on his wall, his mom, holding a tray of Waffle House pancakes after a 14-hour shift. He whispered, "We build it. From the bottom up." That night, J.D. Vance didn't sleep. He was planning a movement, one the establishment couldn't see coming until it was too late. J.D. Vance trusted few, but one of them was his chief of staff, Michael Landers, a quiet, loyal Ohio native who'd followed J.D. since the Senate, until now. That morning, J.D. walked into a secure meeting room and froze. Landers was sitting across from Mitch McConnell, not speaking, listening. He didn't know J.D. was behind the tinted glass. "Vance is emotional," McConnell was saying. "He'll blow up soon enough. Just keep him talking. Keep him feeling heard." J.D.'s heart sank. It wasn't just betrayal from above. It was rot inside his own walls. He left without being seen. He didn't fire Landers immediately. He didn't rage. That wasn't J.D.'s way. Instead, he went back to his office, closed the blinds, and pulled out a legal pad. He wrote a list titled, "Who Can I Still Trust?" The list had 4 names. 4. And 2 of them weren't in Washington. J.D. wasn't just outnumbered. He was isolated. But something deeper began to stir. Not anger. Conviction. He would clean house. He would confront the rot. And he would do it with millions watching. J.D. Vance walked the streets of Middletown, Ohio at dawn. No security. No press. Just him. The town hadn't changed much since he was a boy. Still quiet. Still scarred from the loss of steel. Still full of people trying to survive. He stopped at the diner his mother used to work in. A young boy, maybe 10, was wiping tables. His shirt was too big, his shoes too worn. J.D. asked the waitress, "Who's that?" She whispered, "His dad OD'd. Mom's in rehab. He comes in every day before school to help out." J.D. nodded slowly. That boy was him 25 years ago. He sat down and stared into his coffee. Suddenly, politics felt far away. Senate chambers, leaked videos, power games. This was why he ran. This was the fight, not against Democrats, but against anyone, left or right, who forgot boys like that existed. His phone buzzed. Trump's team, Steve Bannon, 2 governors. His movement was gaining traction. But JD didn't answer. Not yet. He stood, pulled $100 from his wallet, and handed it to the waitress. Make sure that kid eats every morning. Then he walked out, coat over his shoulder. War was coming. But he was ready. It arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note in shaky penmanship. It was from Sergeant Daniel Wright's widow, the man whose nomination JD had defended, the war hero McConnell had blackballed. Her words shattered JD. I don't care about titles, but my Danny believed in you. He said you were the only one in D.C. who didn't treat him like a tool. They took everything from us. His body, his honor, now even his legacy. Please don't stop fighting, Mr. Vance. We have nothing left to lose. JD stared at the paper as the ink blurred beneath his tears. It wasn't politics anymore. It was about dignity, honor, loyalty to those who couldn't fight back. That night, JD Vance lit a candle in his office. Not for attention, not for cameras, but to remember Danny and to promise he would not let this go, no matter what it cost him. The Capitol was unusually quiet. JD Vance walked into a private chamber where Mitch McConnell was meeting with advisors. He didn't wait for an invitation. McConnell looked up, unsurprised. You're making a lot of noise, JD. JD shut the door. You blocked 7 nominees without cause. You used back channels to leak false information about my loyalty, and you planted people on my team. Why? McConnell smiled, slow, cold. Because you're dangerous. You mean honest, JD shot back. No, Mitch said. I mean unpredictable. You still believe in things. That's a liability in this town. The room fell silent. JD's voice dropped to a whisper. Do you even care who you've hurt? McConnell leaned forward. I care about survival. This party belongs to the ones who understand how power works. You're playing Boy Scout. JD stood. You built a machine. I'm building a movement. He turned and walked out. Outside the door, aides stared in silence. Something had changed. The war wasn't cold anymore. It was open, and JD had just drawn the line. That night, JD Vance stood at the Lincoln Memorial, not to speak, not to pose for pictures, just to think. The city lights reflected in the reflecting pool. A quiet drizzle fell. He was soaked, but he didn't care. His wife called. He let it ring. Then came a text from his mother. You were born in fire. Don't fear the heat. It hit him like a freight train, all the late nights growing up, the eviction notices, the overdoses, the silence after his dad vanished. Washington couldn't scare him, not after everything Middletown taught him. JD opened his phone and made a decision that would shock the entire country. He scheduled a press conference, one unlike anything a sitting vice president had ever done. He would go public, with the names, the documents, the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Because sometimes the only way to fix what's broken is to burn down the old and build something new. And in the cold night air, JD Vance whispered to himself, let the storm come. I'm not running anymore. The room was packed. Every reporter, every news camera, every set of eyes was glued to the podium. No teleprompter, no PR team, just JD Vance, standing alone. He looked tired, worn, but his eyes burned with truth. He held up a folder, thick, dog-eared, real. Inside, emails, recordings, documents, proof that Mitch McConnell had personally instructed key senators to block Trump-aligned veterans, judges, and whistleblowers JD had fought for. And then, the audio played. McConnell's voice, cruel and cold. Vance doesn't understand. We can't let these outsiders in. We lose control. The room fell silent. JD's voice broke slightly. This isn't just a betrayal of me. It's a betrayal of you, of every working-class American who still believes in something real. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from holding in years of heartbreak. And then came the moment that shocked even his staff. If the party I joined has no room for truth, then maybe it's time I build something new. Gasps, tears, applause. The nation didn't just hear him, it felt him. The fallout came fast. Within hours, 3 top aides in McConnell's circle resigned. Several GOP senators released statements backing JD. Protesters camped outside Capitol Hill, not with signs of hate, but with American flags and military photos. A former Trump-appointed judge posted, "JD Vance did what no one else would. He told the truth, and I will stand with him until the end." But the most haunting moment came from Mitch McConnell himself. Late at night, an off-the-record recording leaked. McConnell's voice was tired, not angry, just hollow. "We built something to win, but we forgot what we were winning for." That audio spread like wildfire. Even longtime critics admitted the GOP was no longer one party. It had split into the machine and the movement. And at the center of the movement stood a boy from Middletown, Ohio, now vice president, who had taken every knife in the back and turned it into a sword. 1 month later, JD stood at a podium again. But this time it wasn't for war, it was for something greater: unity, truth, renewal. He unveiled the American Renewal Pact, a commitment signed by governors, mayors, and citizens to end cronyism, protect whistleblowers, and honor real Americans again. There were tears in the crowd. Veterans stood and saluted. Mothers held up photos of sons lost to war and policy failures. And then JD said the words that will echo for generations. "This country saved me. When I had nothing and when I was broken, it gave me a second chance. I will spend every breath I have fighting to give that same chance to every American." And just like that, it wasn't about parties anymore. It was about people, about hope, about a future that finally felt real. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, feel, or hope, even just for a second, please do something right now. Like this video so others can find it. Comment below with the one moment that touched your heart the most. And most importantly, subscribe, because this is just the beginning. We're building a community of truth seekers, of fighters, of feelers. You are not alone. You're part of something bigger now. Pick a side, and make it the one that still believes in honor.